This is 4C Part 1. You're being asked to create a report, and that report is going to be used to send reminders to customers who, when their deposit hasn't been paid within 35 days of check-in, they need that reminder being sent. So they should only be sent for reservations that have a check-in date within the next 35 days and where a deposit has not been paid. So we need a query first of all that is going to find that data for us. So we're going to create a query. We usually create queries using the design view method, and we need the reservation table, but we also, if we look at this, we also need the room number and the room description. So we're also going to need the room table and the room type table to get the description. We don't need to worry about the visitor information because that will come later when we create a report. In fact, some would say that you don't really need the room and the room type at this stage. I've just decided that we'll put it on now rather than later. So if we put on the information that's asked for, we want the check-in date and the check-out date. We also want the room number and we want the description. We're also going to need to know whether the deposit that's been received has been set to 0 or not. So I'm going to put that on there and see whether or not that is 0. So my criteria for whether the deposit being received is going to be that that is 0. That will tell me they haven't paid a deposit. Finally, we also need the visitor ID, because when we create the report will need to know how this query relates to the visitor table. You see, it won't link to the relationships automatically that you've got. It needs to have something in there. So we'll put a visitor ID in there so we can link to the visitor table. Now the next thing is that we want the check-in date. So this is our check-in date here. I'm just going to make it a bit wider so we can see what we're doing. We want the check-in date to be within the next 35 days. So we need to have a look, okay, at when the next 35 days are. Now we can use a function called dateAdd for this. So what I'm going to do, okay, is I'm going to use that function dateAdd, and I'm going to add 35 days to today's date, and then I'm going to say that the check-in date has got to be before 35 days away from today's date. That means that there's less than 35 days to go until check-in. Okay, so it's going to be less than dateAdd is what adds things to a date. We're going to add days. Okay, now these all vary. It's not just D for days, W for week, Y for year. Some of them have, like for year for example, has 4 Ys, but you can look that up on the internet very easily to find the information out. We're going to add 35 days and we're going to add it to today's date. Okay, now it's to close bracket. That's because I put brackets in but I forgot to close the bracket for dateAdd. There we go. Okay, so that's our query. Now what we need to do is look at this as a whole thing and see if it is actually showing us those that are within the next 35 days. And if we have a look at these, I'm doing this on the 2nd of August 2015. So 2nd of September even, 35 days is going to be somewhere around about October 2015. So it's got to be there we go. These are all less than October 2015. And we've even got some that go back as far as this because the deposit still hasn't been received from that long ago. And we just need to save this query so that it can be used within the report. I suggest that you call it query deposits due, because that's what it's about. The next tutorial will take you through creating the actual report.